Chapter 1. The Awakening. First thing Sierra felt was cold. Not the gentle chill of autumn air or the crisp bite of winter morning. This was the cold of death itself, seeping into bones that had forgotten how to feel. Her lungs burned as they dragged in their first breath in 5 centuries, and the pain was exquisite, a reminder that she was somehow impossibly alive. Her eyes flew open to darkness. Panic clawed at her chest as fragmented memories crashed through her mind like shattered glass. The ceremony, the screaming, her mother's face twisted in terror as the Alpha King's guards tore through their village. And then nothing. A void where her life should have been. Sierra's fingers scraped against rough stone beneath her, and she forced herself to sit up despite every muscle screaming in protest. The movement sent waves of dizziness through her, and she pressed her palm against the cold ground, waiting for the world to stop spinning. Where was she? Gradually, her eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through cracks in what appeared to be ancient stonework. She was in some kind of tomb, no, a sanctuary. Symbols she didn't recognize covered the walls, glowing faintly with residual magic that made her skin prickle. The air smelled of earth and old power, of secrets buried deep and forgotten by time. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be anywhere. The last thing she remembered was being 6 months old, cradled in her mother's arms as Alpha King Aldrich Thornwood descended upon their Omega settlement like a plague. Her parents had hidden something the king wanted desperately enough to burn their entire village to ash. Something worth slaughtering every man, woman, and child who refused to surrender it. Something worth killing a baby. But she hadn't died. Somehow, impossibly, she had survived. Sierra stumbled to her feet, her legs weak and unfamiliar. Her body felt wrong, too tall to develop. She looked down at hands that should have been infant small, but were instead the hands of a grown woman. Slender fingers, pale skin that seemed to shimmer faintly in the magical light. What had they done to her? A sound echoed from somewhere above, footsteps, heavy and purposeful. Her heart, which had only just remembered how to beat, began to race. Every instinct she possessed, instincts she shouldn't have at 6 months old but somehow did, screamed at her to hide. She pressed herself against the wall, her breath coming in short, silent gasps. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied by voices. Male voices, deep and commanding. "Are you certain the wards broke tonight?" The first voice was smooth, cultured, with an edge of impatience that made her skin crawl. Positive, Commander Vane. The magical signature was unmistakable. Something old woke up down here. The second voice was younger, uncertain. After 500 years, that tomb should have been nothing but dust and bones. If someone's been foolish enough to disturb it, it wasn't disturbed, sir. The wards collapsed from the inside. Silence fell, heavy and ominous. Sierra held her breath, pressing harder against the stone, as if she could merge with it, become invisible, cease to exist entirely. From the inside, Commander Vane repeated slowly, "You're telling me that something imprisoned in that tomb broke free on its own?" "I'm telling you, the magic protecting it failed catastrophically, and now there's a hole where a sealed chamber used to be. Alert the Alpha King immediately. If one of the Omega bloodlines has resurfaced." The rest of his words were lost as pure, visceral rage exploded through Sierra's chest. The Alpha King. After 500 years, that title still existed. The Thornwood line still ruled, which meant justice had never come. Her people had died for nothing, their deaths swept under the carpet of history, their names forgotten, and she had lost 500 years. The stone beneath her palm cracked. Sierra jerked her hand back, staring in horror as spiderweb fractures spread from where she'd touched the wall. Magic raw, unfocused, and ancient crackled along her fingertips like lightning. The glowing symbols on the walls flared brighter, responding to her fury. "Did you hear that?" The younger voice called out, much closer now. She had to move. Now. Sierra spun, searching desperately for another exit. There a narrow passage at the far end of the chamber, barely visible in the shadows. She ran toward it, her unfamiliar legs carrying her with surprising speed and grace. Behind her, she heard the men enter the chamber, heard their sharp intakes of breath as they discovered the empty tomb. It's gone. Whatever was sealed here is. She didn't wait to hear more. The passage was barely wide enough for her shoulders, but she squeezed through, ignoring the stone scraping her skin. The tunnel angled upward, and she climbed desperately, following the faint current of fresh air that promised freedom. Her hands found purchase on roots and rocks as the passage grew steeper. Earth crumbled beneath her fingers. Her lungs burned again, but this time from exertion rather than resurrection. Behind her, she could hear the men attempting to follow, could hear Commander Vane barking orders. The tunnel opened suddenly into a forest. Sierra tumbled out onto moss-covered ground, gasping. Above her, stars she didn't recognize, scattered across an unfamiliar sky. The trees were ancient, their branches forming a canopy so thick it blocked out most of the moonlight. This wasn't her forest. This wasn't her world. 500 years. Everything she'd known was gone. She forced herself to stand, swaying slightly as she got her bearings. In the distance, she could see lights, a settlement of some kind, larger than any village she'd known in her time. The world had moved on without her, had changed in ways she couldn't begin to comprehend. But one thing hadn't changed: the Thornwood bloodline still ruled. The Alpha King who'd ordered her death or his descendants still held power. Sierra's hands clenched into fists, and that strange magic sparked again, dancing between her fingers like living fire. She didn't know how she was alive. She didn't know what she'd become during those lost centuries, or what power had preserved her, but she knew why she'd been brought back. The forest whispered around her, welcoming her, recognizing something in her blood that sang of old magic and older grudges. Somewhere in that distant settlement, the current Alpha King lived, unaware that his ancestors' greatest mistake had just clawed its way back into the world. Sierra smiled. And it was not a kind expression. She had been 6 months old when Aldrich Thornwood tried to erase her from existence. She was something else entirely now, and she had all the time in the world for revenge.
Asterisk Chapter 2. The hunter and the hunted Sarah had been walking for hours when she realized she was being followed. The forest had grown denser as she moved away from the tomb, the ancient trees pressing closer together as if trying to shield her from whatever lay beyond. Her bare feet made no sound on the moss-covered earth, another strange gift of whatever magic had preserved her. She moved like a ghost through the undergrowth, instinctively avoiding branches and roots despite never having walked through a forest as an adult before. The memories were there, somehow. Not her memories, but older ones, embedded in her very bones. The knowledge of how to move silently, how to read the wind, how to sense danger before it struck. Her mother's bloodline had been ancient even in her time, descended from the first Omegas who'd walked these lands when magic still ran wild and free. Perhaps that's what had saved her. Or cursed her, depending on how she chose to see it. The sensation of being watched intensified, raising goosebumps along her arms. Sierra paused beside a massive oak, pressing her palm against its rough bark. The tree hummed with life, its roots running deep into earth that remembered when her kind had been revered rather than hunted. She closed her eyes and reached out with senses she didn't understand, searching for the source of her unease. There, upwind, moving with practiced stealth. Not human, the scent was all wrong, carrying notes of wild places and untamed power. A shifter, then male, and hunting her with purpose. Her heart began to pound, but she forced herself to remain still. Panic would only get her killed, and she hadn't survived 5 centuries in a magical stasis just to die in her first night of freedom. She needed to think, to plan, to a branch snapped behind her. Sierra spun, hands raised instinctively. Magic crackled along her fingertips, that same wild energy that had fractured stone in the tomb. But the forest clearing behind her was empty, filled only with shadows and silver moonlight filtering through the canopy. Clever, a voice said from above. She looked up just as a figure dropped from the branches overhead, landing in a crouch with impossible grace. He rose slowly, and Sierra's breath caught despite herself. The man before her was tall and powerfully built, his body moving with the fluid confidence of a natural predator. Dark hair fell across a face that could have been carved from stone, all sharp angles and hard edges, except for his eyes. Those eyes were an impossible shade of amber, glowing faintly in the darkness, and they studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed, vulnerable, dangerous. "You're the one who broke the wards." It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, roughened by something that might have been exhaustion or pain. He took a step closer, and she noticed he was favoring his left side. "The Omega tomb has been sealed for 500 years. My family has guarded it for generations, waiting for—" He stopped abruptly, his eyes narrowing as he truly looked at her for the first time. The recognition in his gaze sent ice through her veins. "Impossible," he breathed. You're just a child in the records. 6 months old when he cut himself off again. But the damage was done when your Alpha King murdered my entire village. Sarah finished coldly, though her voice shook. When he slaughtered every Omega who refused to give him what he wanted. When he tried to kill an infant because my mother's bloodline threatened his power. The shifter's expression flickered with something that might have been pain or regret. That was 5 centuries ago. Aldrich Thornwood was a tyrant, yes, but he's long dead. The kingdom has changed, has it? She laughed bitterly, and the magic sparked brighter around her hands. Then why did I wake to guards still hunting Omega bloodlines? Why does your family still stand watch over my prison? Why does the Thornwood line still rule? He was silent for a long moment, those amber eyes searching her face. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter, almost gentle. Because some debts take longer than one lifetime to repay. Some sins echo through generations. He took another step closer, and this time she saw him wince. I'm not your enemy, despite what you might think. Then what are you? She demanded, standing her ground even as every instinct screamed at her to run. Tired, he said simply. I'm very, very tired of carrying the weight of my ancestors' mistakes. He gestured to his side, where his shirt was torn and darkened with blood, and currently bleeding from a wound that won't heal because I was too busy tracking you to notice the silver trap some hunters set in the northern woods. Silver. The word sent a jolt through her. Only one thing reacted to Silver that way. You're a werewolf, she said slowly. Not just a shifter. A true wolf. He smiled, and it was a weary, painful thing. And you're a resurrected amigo with enough raw magic crackling around you to level half the forest. We're quite the pair, despite everything, the fear, the anger, the crushing weight of 500 lost years. Sarah felt something unexpected flutter in her chest. Not trust, not yet, but curiosity, perhaps. And something else, something that hummed in her blood when she looked at him, a recognition that went deeper than reason or logic. What's your name? She asked as he hesitated, as if the answer carried weight she couldn't yet understand. Cale, he said finally. Cale Thornwood, the world tilted. Thornwood, he was one of them, one of the bloodline that had destroyed everything she'd ever known. She should attack him, should unleash whatever power burned inside her and make him pay for his ancestors' sins. But he was still bleeding, still watching her with those impossible amber eyes. And he hadn't tried to hurt her, hadn't even tried to capture her, though she could sense the strength in him, could feel the wolf lurking just beneath his skin. You're injured, she heard herself say, the words escaping before she could stop them. Cal's eyebrows rose. I am. Silver poisoning can kill a werewolf. It can. Why are you telling me this? Why aren't you trying to take me back to your Alpha King? His laugh was bitter. Because I am the Alpha King, little Omega, and taking you back to the capital is the last thing either of us needs right now. He swayed slightly, pressing a hand harder against his wounded side. The council would have you executed within the hour, and I've already lost too much to... He didn't finish. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Sarah stood frozen for a heartbeat, staring at the unconscious Alpha King at her feet. The man whose bloodline had destroyed hers. The man who just called her little Omega with something that sounded almost like affection. The man who was currently dying from silver poisoning in the middle of a dark forest. She should leave him. Should let fate claim him as payment for what his family had done. But her feet were already moving, her hands already reaching for him. Drawn by something she couldn't name and didn't want to examine too closely. Damn you, she whispered, kneeling beside him. Damn you and your entire cursed bloodline. His eyes fluttered open for just a moment, fever bright and golden. Already damned, he murmured. Been damned for 500 years. You're just the reckoning we've been waiting for. Then he was gone again, unconscious and vulnerable. And Sarah was left with the most impossible choice of her very long, very short life. Save her enemy or let him die. Chapter 3. Wounds that won't heal. Sarah's hands trembled as she tore away the blooded fabric of Cal's shirt. The wound was worse than she thought. 3 deep gashes across his ribs, the edges blackened with silver poisoning. The metal was still working its way through his system, preventing his werewolf healing from taking hold. She should walk away. Every logical part of her screamed to leave him here, to let the forest claim the last of the Thornwood line and end the bloodline that had ended hers. But her hands wouldn't stop moving. "I hate you," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to him or herself. "I hate everything you represent." Her palms hovered over the wound, and that strange magic that had been crackling through her since she woke hummed louder, responding to her desperate need. It felt ancient and familiar, like muscle memory from a life she'd never lived. Omega magic, the healing gift that had made her people both revered and hunted, the gift that had gotten them all killed. Light bloomed between her hands and his torn flesh, silver white and warm. Kel's body jerked, his jaw clenching even in unconsciousness as the magic began to draw out the poison. Sarah gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead. She'd never done this before, had never done anything before except exist for 6 months and then sleep for 500 years, but somehow her body knew what to do. The magic pulled at something deep inside her, draining her in ways she didn't understand. Her vision swam, but she held on, watching as the blackened edges of his wound slowly began to pink, as the silver corruption lifted like smoke in sunlight. "Come on," she muttered. "Don't you dare die on me, Thornwood." "Not before I get answers." His eyes snapped open. Sarah gasped as Kel's hand shot up, wrapping around her wrist with shocking speed. Those amber eyes were wild, unfocused, his wolf rising to the surface in response to pain and perceived threat. For a heartbeat, she saw death in his gaze, and then recognition flickered, and his grip gentled but didn't release. "You're healing me," he said roughly, his voice little more than a growl. "Why, I don't know," she admitted, and it was the truth. "Maybe because you're more useful to me alive. Maybe because I want the satisfaction of killing you myself when I understand what happened to my people." She met his gaze steadily, refusing to flinch. "Or maybe I'm just an idiot who can't let anyone die in front of her, even her worst enemy." Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or respect. His thumb brushed absently against her wrist, and she realized he could feel her pulse racing beneath his fingers. The touch sent an unexpected warmth through her, at odds with the cold fury she wanted to maintain. "You're not an idiot," Kel said quietly. "And I'm not your worst enemy, no matter what you think." He paused, wincing as another wave of her magic pulled more poison from his system. "The ones who want you dead are sitting in my council chambers right now, wondering why I haven't already brought them your head." Sarah's magic faltered. "What?" He released her wrist slowly, his hand falling back to his side. "The tomb wasn't meant to keep you imprisoned forever. It was meant to keep you safe." At her incredulous look, he continued, "My great-grandfather discovered what Aldrich had done, the massacre, the attempted infanticide. He spent his entire reign trying to undo the damage, but the council was too powerful, too invested in the old ways. So he made a deal with the last surviving Omega Elder. They would hide you, suspend you in time until the kingdom changed enough that you might survive." "That's impossible," Sarah breathed. "Why would a Thornwood help an Omega?" "Because Aldrich didn't just murder your village that night." Cal's voice went hollow. "He murdered his own mate. Your mother was his fated mate, and when she refused to let him use your bloodline's magic for his wars, he killed her. Killed everyone." The bond breaking nearly destroyed him, but he was too proud, too consumed by power to admit what he'd done. He met her eyes. "Every Alpha King since has carried that curse. We can't find our mates, can't form the bond. It's as if the moon goddess herself turned her back on our line for that sin." Sarah's world tilted again. Her mother had been mated to the monster who'd killed her. The tragedy of it, the cosmic cruelty, still her breath. "Then why are you helping me now?" she asked. "If you've been cursed, if your entire bloodline has been suffering, because it's what we deserve," Kale said simply. "And because I've spent my entire life trying to be better than the men who came before me. Trying to earn redemption I'll probably never receive." He struggled to sit up, and she found herself setting him without thinking. "Your awakening wasn't an accident." The magic was set to release you when enough had changed, when there was finally an alpha king who might actually protect you rather than kill you. And do you think that's you? He smiled, sad and tired. I think I'm the best chance you're going to get. The council wants to finish what Aldrich started. They see your bloodline as a threat to their power, and their right to be afraid. An Omega with your heritage could reshape the entire kingdom. His hand found hers, warm and calloused, or destroy it. Your choice. Sierra looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers interlaced with hers as if they'd been made to fit together. The magic still hummed between them, but it had changed to no longer just healing energy, but something deeper, something that made her heart race for entirely different reasons. This was her enemy, the heir to the bloodline that had destroyed everything. So why did touching him feel like coming home? I don't trust you, she said. Good, you shouldn't. Cal's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture unconscious and intimate. But I'm asking you to work with me anyway. Let me help you understand this new world. Let me show you what's changed and what hasn't. His amber eyes held hers, intense and pleading. And then, when you have all the information, if you still want to destroy me and everything I built, I won't stop you. Why would you make that offer? Because you deserve the truth. Because my family owes you more than I could ever repay. He paused, and something raw crossed his face. And because the moment you touched me, I felt something I thought I'd never feel. Something that shouldn't be possible for someone cursed as I am. Sarah's breath caught. What? But before he could answer, a howl split the night long, mournful, and far too close. Cal's entire body went rigid, his hand tightening around hers. They found us, he said grimly. The council's hunters. We need to move now. He tried to stand and immediately swayed. The healing had helped, but he was still weak, still recovering. Sarah caught him, her arm going around his waist to steady him. Where can we go? She asked. Cale looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw real fear in his eyes. Not for himself, she realized. For her, there's a safe house, 3 miles north. If we can reach it before they catch our scent, another howl, closer this time. Can you run? Sarah thought of 500 years stolen, of a family murdered, of a fate she'd never chosen. She thought of the magic thrumming through her veins and the impossible pull she felt toward the wounded Alpha King in her arms. I can run, she said. The question is, can you keep up? Despite everything, Cale laughed a rough, genuine sound that transformed his harsh features. Try me, little Omega. And together, they fled into the darkness, hunted by the very kingdom one of them ruled. Chapter 4. Shelter in the Storm's safe house was barely more than a hunting cabin, nestled deep in a ravine where the ancient pines grew so thick they blocked out the sky. Sarah's lungs burned as they stumbled through the doorway, Cal's weight heavy against her side. She'd been supporting more and more of him over the last mile, as his strength faded. The silver poisoning still taking its toll despite her healing behind them. The howls had grown distant but never disappeared entirely. The hunters were tracking them methodically, patient in their pursuit. Cale collapsed onto a worn sofa the moment they were inside, his breathing ragged. Sarah quickly bolted the door and moved to the windows, checking the heavy shutters that already covered them. Runes had been carved into the wood protection wards, old and powerful. They can't track us magically through those, Cale said, reading her thoughts. And the ravine masks our scent. We have a few hours at least. Sarah turned to face him, taking in his pale features and the way he pressed a hand to his side where the wounds, though closed, still pained him. Without the adrenaline of their flight, the reality of their situation crashed over her. She was alone with the Alpha King, the man whose ancestor had destroyed her entire world. The man whose touch made her magic sing in ways that terrified her. There's a well out back, Cale said quietly, watching her with those 2 perceptive amber eyes. Water should still be clean. And there might be some dried provisions in the cabinet, though it's been a year since I've been here. You come here often. She meant for it to sound casual, but her voice came out shaky. When I need to escape the capital. When the weight of the crown gets too heavy. He leaned his head back, exposing the strong column of his throat. Or when I need to remember that I'm more than just the title. That somewhere under all the politics and bloodline expectations, there's still something human left. Sarah moved to the cabinet, needing something to do with her hands. She found some sealed packages, dried meat, hardtack, even some preserved fruit. You're not human though. You're a werewolf. We're more human than you think. We love, we grieve, we make mistakes. His voice went soft. We carry the sins of our fathers like stones around our necks. She turned, packages in hand, and found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. In the dim light filtering through cracks in the shutters, he looked younger somehow. Less like a king and more like a man who'd been running from something his entire life. Tell me about the curse, she said, settling onto a chair across from him. The real story, not the version meant to make me sympathetic. Cale was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of generations. When Aldrich killed your mother, his mate, the bond breaking should have killed him too. That's how it works. Mates are two halves of one soul, and destroying one destroys both. He met her eyes. But Aldrich was a powerful alpha, and he was furious that the moon goddess had given him an Omega as his mate. He saw it as an insult, a weakening of his bloodline. So he used dark magic to survive the bond breaking, to tear apart what should never be torn. And the goddess punished him. Sarah whispered, punished all of us. Every alpha king born after him has been unable to form the mate bond. We can feel the pull, that sense of recognition when we meet someone meant for us, but the bond won't complete. Can't complete. His jaw clenched. My father met his mate when he was 20. He spent the next 30 years married to her, loving her, and never once able to fully bond with her. He died knowing his own children might never experience true completion. The anguish in his voice broke something in Sarah's chest. She'd been so focused on her own loss, her own pain, that she hadn't considered what 500 years of divine punishment had done to the innocent descendants of a monster. That's why the council wants me dead, she said slowly. They think I'm the key to the curse. They think you're the source of it. That your bloodline cursed us, and that killing you will end it. Cal's laugh was bitter. They're probably right about the first part. Omega magic is powerful, especially when bonded to grief and rage. Your mother's death cursed my family, but killing you won't break it. It'll only add your death to the weight we already carry. Sarah stood and moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters at the darkened forest beyond. What if I want them to suffer? What if I think 500 years isn't long enough? She heard him rise, heard his footsteps crossing the small space. He stopped close behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell the scent of pine and night air that clung to him. Then I wouldn't blame you, Kel said softly. I'd understand completely, but... She didn't turn around. But I'm asking you not to. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, tentative, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Not because I think we deserve forgiveness. We don't. But because I think you deserve better than being consumed by the same rage that destroyed Aldrich. Sarah finally turned and found herself inches from him. This close, she could see flecks of gold in his amber eyes, could see the faint scars on his jaw that spoke of battles fought and survived, could see the way his gaze dropped to her lips for just a heartbeat before returning to her eyes. When you touched me earlier, he said, his voice rougher now. When you were healing me, I felt something I haven't felt since I was old enough to understand what I was missing. His hand slid from her shoulder to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin. The curse should make it impossible. But with you, don't, Sarah breathed, even as she leaned into his touch. Don't say it. Why not? Because if we're fated mates, it means the universe has a truly terrible sense of humor. Her eyes burned with unshed tears. It means I'm meant to love the one person I should hate most in this world. Cal's other hand came up to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle. Or it means that 500 years of suffering has led to this moment. A chance for both our bloodlines to finally heal. I don't know how to do that, she admitted. I don't know how to be anything other than angry. Then be angry. Rage at me, rage at my ancestors, rage at the unfairness of it all. He leaned his forehead against hers, and the contact sent sparks through her entire body. But don't leave. Don't run from us because you're afraid of what it might mean. Sierra's hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heart beating steady and strong beneath her palms. The mate bond hummed between them, fragile and new. Impossible and inevitable. I should push you away, she whispered. Probably. I should make you suffer for what your family did to mine. Definitely. So why can't I? Kale smiled, sad and hopeful all at once. Because you're braver than you think. And because somewhere in that beautiful, furious heart of yours, you already know the truth. What truth? That this was always meant to happen. You were always meant to wake. I was always meant to find you. His thumb traced her lower lip, and she shivered. And we were always meant to either destroy each other or save each other. There's no in-between for people like us. Before Sarah could respond, could process the weight of his words, a new sound cut through the night, not howls this time, but something worse. The sharp crack of gunfire, close and getting closer. Cal's entire body went rigid. Silver bullets. They brought hunters with guns. He pulled back, his expression hardening into something fierce and protective. Sarah, listen to me very carefully. There's a root cellar beneath the kitchen. Get inside and don't come out until absolutely not. This isn't a debate. Those bullets will kill me, and they'll do worse to you. You need to hide while you what? Face them alone, weakened from silver poisoning. Sarah grabbed his arm, her magic flaring instinctively. I didn't heal you just to watch you die playing. Hero, I'm the Alpha King. Protecting you is literally my duty, and I'm an Omega with 500 years of rage and more magic than I know what to do with. She met his eyes steadily. We fight together, or we don't fight at all. For a moment, Kale looked like he wanted to argue. Then that sad, hopeful smile returned. You're going to be impossible to deal with, aren't you? Count on it. The gunfire came closer. Their time had run out. Chapter 5. Blood and Magic. First bullet shattered a window, sending splinters of wood and glass spraying across the cabin. Sarah threw up her hands instinctively, and the magic that had been simmering inside her exploded outward in a shield of pure light. The second and third bullets struck the barrier and disintegrated, leaving nothing but ash. Kel stared at her, stunned. How did you? I don't know. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she maintained the shield, feeling it drain her energy with every second. I just knew I had to protect us, and it did happen. Your mother's bloodline. Kale moved beside her, his eyes beginning to glow with Volf light. The old texts said the first Omegas could shield entire villages. I thought it was legend. Apparently not. Sarah gritted her teeth as more bullets struck her barrier. Through the magical shimmer, she could see shadows moving in the forest, at least a dozen figures, all armed, all advancing with military precision. How long can you hold a partial shift? Long enough. Why? Because I have an idea, but it requires me to drop the shield for a few seconds. She glanced at him. Can you give me that time? Cal's answering smile was all Volf. Little Omega, I'm an Alpha King who hasn't had a good fight in months. Try to keep up. The moment Sarah dropped the barrier, Kale exploded into motion. He didn't fully shift, couldn't risk it with the silver still in his system, but his partial transformation was terrifying enough. Claws extended, fangs lengthened, his body becoming something between man and beast. He crashed through the door before the hunters could react, moving with speed that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size. Sarah heard screams, the wet sound of claws meeting flesh. But she couldn't focus on that. She pressed her palms to the wooden floor, reaching deep into the earth beneath the cabin, calling to the ancient magic that slumbered in the roots and soil. Please, she whispered. Please understand. We need help. The forest answered. Roots burst through the cabin floor, snaking toward the windows and door with predatory intelligence. Sarah felt their hunger, their ancient rage at those who would hunt the innocent. She guided them, shaped them, sent them flowing out into the night where they found the hunters with unerring accuracy. Outside, chaos erupted. Men shouted in terror as roots wrapped around ankles and wrists, dragging them to the ground. Guns fired wildly, hitting trees and earth, but never their intended targets. And through it all, Kale moved like death incarnate, his claws finding every weakness, his strength overwhelming even trained hunters. But there were too many. Sierra saw the moment one of the hunters got behind Kale, saw the silver blade glinting in the moonlight as it arced toward his unprotected back. She didn't think, just reacted. Her magic lashed out like a whip, wrapping around the attacker and hurling him into a tree with bone-breaking force. The effort sent her to her knees, gasping. Using this much power so soon after waking was destroying her, burning through reserves she didn't have. Black spots danced across her vision, and she tasted copper on her tongue. Sierra. Kale was at her side instantly, his clawed hands surprisingly gentle as they caught her. "Stop, you're killing yourself." "Can't." She forced herself upright, calling on the last dregs of her strength. "There's more coming. I can feel them." She was right. Through the trees, she sensed another wave of hunters, these ones different. Not human shifters, loyal to the council. Stronger, faster, and far more deadly. "The root cellar," Kale said urgently. "Now, before I have a better idea." Sierra met his eyes, seeing her own exhaustion reflected in his face. "Trust me with my life, then shift fully. I'll handle the silver." Kale's eyes widened. "That's impossible. The poison is only poison because your Wolf can't fight it. But my magic can." She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. "I can keep you stable long enough for you to fight properly. But I need you to trust me completely." For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he nodded, once decisive. "Do it." Sierra closed her eyes and let her magic flow into him, seeking out the traces of silver still corrupting his system. It was like trying to catch smoke, but she persisted, wrapping her power around the poison and neutralizing it particle by particle. At the same time, she felt Kel's body beginning to change. Bones restructuring, muscles expanding. The shift was beautiful and terrible. She'd never seen a true alpha transformation before, never witnessed the raw power of a werewolf embracing their primal nature. Kel's human form melted away, replaced by something massive and magnificent, a wolf the size of a bear. With fur as dark as midnight and those same amber eyes burning with intelligence and fury. And through her magic still connecting them, Sierra felt everything he felt. The euphoria of the shift, the strength flooding back into his limbs, the predatory focus sharpening his senses. It was overwhelming and intoxicating, and for a moment she understood why humans feared shifters. They were glorious. The Wolfkale turned his massive head toward her, and she felt his concern through their connection. She was swaying on her feet, barely conscious, held upright only by willpower and stubbornness. "I'm fine," she lied. "Go, I'll hold the cabin." He made a sound low in his throat, part protest, part acceptance. Then he was gone, launching himself into the forest where the new wave of hunters was emerging from the tree line. Sierra collapsed against the doorframe, watching through blurred vision as Kale tore into the council's shifter guards. He was magnificent, all power and fury, an alpha king defending his territory. His mate. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it felt right. She didn't see the hunter who'd circled around the cabin. Didn't sense him until his hand clamped over her mouth and a blade pressed against her throat. Finally, a cold voice hissed in her ear. "The lost Omega pup. The council will pay handsomely for your head." Sierra tried to call her magic, but she had nothing left. She'd burned through everything keeping Kale stable, protecting the cabin, fighting the hunters. She was empty, defenseless. Through the mate bond she'd barely begun to understand, she felt Kel's fury spike, felt him try to turn back, to reach her. But he was too far away, surrounded by too many enemies. The blade bit into her skin, drawing blood. Then something inside her, something that had been sleeping far longer than 500 years, woke up. Her mother's voice echoed through her mind. A memory that shouldn't exist. "You are Omega, my daughter. We do not harm, but we do not break either." Power exploded from Sierra's core, pure and ancient and absolutely uncontrollable. It wasn't the controlled magic she'd been using. This was something older, something that predated werewolf kingdoms and human hunters. This was the magic of the first Omegas, who had walked when the world was young and wild and God still spoke to mortals. The hunter screamed as the power threw him backward, his body slamming into a tree hard enough to crack the trunk. Around the cabin, every hunter still standing was driven to their knees by the sheer weight of her presence. And in the forest, every Wolf friend and foe alike bowed. Sira stood in the doorway, her eyes blazing with silver light, her hair floating in a wine that didn't exist. She was radiant and terrifying, a goddess of vengeance wrapped in mortal flesh. Enough, she commanded, and her voice carried the weight of centuries. You came to my home. You hunted what is mine. Now you will leave. Or you will face what your ancestors feared when they first whispered the name Omega in the darkness. The hunters ran. Even the council's shifters retreated, their instincts overriding their orders in the face of something that transcended pack politics and mortal power. And then, as quickly as it had risen, the power drained away. Sira's legs gave out, and she was falling, the world spinning around her in a kaleidoscope of pain and exhaustion. Strong arms caught her Kale. Human again, his body warm against her frozen skin. I've got you, he murmured, carrying her back inside the cabin. You're safe. You're safe. Did I? She mumbled against his chest. Did I hurt anyone? You saved us. His voice was thick with emotion. You magnificent, terrifying, impossible woman. You saved us. Sira smiled despite the darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision. Good, because I'm not done being angry at you yet. His laugh was the last thing she heard before unconsciousness claimed her. Chapter 6. The morning after Sarah woke to warmth and the scent of pine smoke. For a disoriented moment, she thought she was back in her mother's arms, safe in the village before everything turned to ash and screaming. Then memory crashed back the tomb, the forest, the hunters, and power that had torn through her like lightning. She opened her eyes to find herself on the cabin's sofa, wrapped in soft furs that smelled of earth and wild places. Morning light filtered through the shutters, painting golden stripes across rough wooden floors. And beside her, slumped in a chair he'd pulled close, was Kale. He was asleep, his head tilted at an angle that would leave his neck aching when he woke. Even in sleep, exhaustion lined his face, dark circles under his eyes, tension in his jaw. His shirt was torn and bloodstained, and she could see bandages wrapped around his ribs where the silver wounds had been. He'd stayed with her all night, watching over her while she recovered. Something twisted in Sira's chest, an emotion too complicated to name. This man was supposed to be her enemy. His bloodline had destroyed hers. And yet here he sat, keeping vigil like a guardian angel, looking more vulnerable than any alpha king should ever allow himself to be. She shifted, trying to sit up without waking him, but the movement made her head spin. A small sound of discomfort escaped her throat. Cal's eyes snapped open instantly, alert despite his obvious exhaustion. Sira, relief flooded his features. How do you feel? Like I tried to hold back an avalanche with my bare hands. Her voice came out hoarse. What happened after you single-handedly terrified an entire hunting party into retreat? A smile ghosted across his lips. You collapsed. I barely caught you before you hit the ground. He leaned forward, studying her face with concerned intensity. You've been unconscious for almost 12 hours. I was beginning to worry you drained yourself beyond recovery. 12 hours. Sira tried to sit up again, and this time Kale was there, his hands gentle as they helped her upright. The hunters are long gone. You put the fear of the moon goddess into them. He adjusted the furs around her shoulders with surprising tenderness. Word will have reached the capital by now. The council knows what you are, what you can do. Sira's stomach dropped. Then they'll send more, probably. Kale stood and moved to a pot hanging over the fireplace, ladling something that smelled heavenly into a wooden bowl. But not immediately. You bought us time. They'll need to regroup, reassess their strategy. He returned with the bowl, some kind of stew, rich with herbs and meat. Eat, you need to rebuild your strength. She accepted the bowl, and their fingers brushed. The mate bond hung between them, stronger now after what they'd shared in battle. Sira saw Kale feel it too, saw the way his breath caught and his eyes darkened. You should have run, she said quietly. When I was unconscious. You should have taken the opportunity to return to your capital, to your council. Told them you tried to capture me, but I escaped. Kel settled back into his chair, close enough that their knees almost touched. Is that what you think I should have done? It would have been the politically smart choice. I stopped making politically smart choices the moment I touched you in that forest. His amber eyes held hers. The moment I felt the mate bond snap into place and realized the impossible had happened, Sierra's hands trembled around the bowl. Kale, let me say this, please. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his whole attention focused on her. I've spent my entire life preparing to be Alpha King, learning strategy, politics, how to rule a kingdom fractured by my ancestors' sins. I've made sacrifices, given up everything personal for the good of the realm. His voice went rough. But the one thing I never expected, never dared to hope for was you. You don't even know me. I know you're brave enough to heal your enemy. I know you're powerful enough to make seasoned warriors flee in terror, yet gentle enough to worrying about hurting them. I know you carried 500 years of pain into consciousness, and instead of letting it consume you, you chose to save my life. He reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and cupped her cheek. I know that when I'm near you, the curse that's haunted my family for generations feels like it might finally break. Sierra set the bowl aside with shaking hands. And if it doesn't, if this bond destroys us both, then at least I'll have known what it feels like to be complete. His thumb traced her cheekbone with aching tenderness. One day with you is worth a lifetime of empty years. The words broke something open inside her. Sierra found herself leaning into his touch, her eyes burning with tears she refused to shed. I'm supposed to hate you. Everything I am, everything I've lost, it all says I should want you dead. I know, but I don't. The admission felt like surrender. When that hunter had a knife to my throat, all I could think was that if I died, you'd blame yourself. And I couldn't bear the thought of you carrying one more weight, one more guilt that wasn't yours to bear. Cal's expression transformed hope and anguish, mixing into something beautiful and broken. Sierra, I'm terrified, she whispered. I'm terrified of what I feel for you, of how quickly you become important to me, of how much it will hurt if this is just another cosmic joke. He slid from the chair onto his knees in front of her, bringing them eye to eye. Then let's be terrified together. His hands framed her face now, gentle and sure. Let's figure this out one day at a time. No expectations, no demands, just ... us, learning what this bond means. What if your council won't accept it? Then they'll have to choose between me and their prejudices. His jaw set with determination. And I promise you, little Omega, I will not let them hurt you. Not while I'm breathing. The conviction in his voice, the fierce protectiveness, ended her completely. Sierra's hands came up to cover his, holding him as he held her. I'm still angry. At your ancestor, at what happened to my family. That doesn't just disappear. Good, be angry. Rage at the injustice of it all. He pressed his forehead to hers, and she felt his breath warm against her lips. But be angry while we fight to make things right. While we change the kingdom into something worthy of your people's legacy. You make it sound possible. With you, I believe anything is possible. They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, hearts beating in synchrony. The mate bond wrapped around them like golden threads, weaving them together in ways that transcended logic or history or 500 years of pain. Sierra thought about her mother, about the village lost to flames, about the baby she'd been who never got to grow up naturally. And she thought about Cale, the man carrying the weight of sins not his own, trying so desperately to be better than the monster who'd come before. Maybe revenge wasn't what she needed. Maybe what she needed was this, a chance to rebuild, to heal, to create something new from the ashes of the old. Teach me about this world, she said finally. About what I've missed, what's changed, about who you really are beneath the crown and the title. Relief and joy flooded Cal's features. I will. I'll show you everything. And in return, I'll try not to destroy your kingdom. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. I'd appreciate that. Then, more seriously, though if you decide you need to reshape some parts of it, I'm willing to help. Dangerous words. Alpha King, only if you're a dangerous woman. Little Omega, Sierra smiled despite herself. Oh, I'm definitely dangerous. I'm counting on it. The moment stretched between them, charged and intimate. Cal's gaze dropped to her lips, and she felt her heart begin to race. This would be their first real kiss, not born of desperation or danger, but of choice, of accepting what was building between them. But before either could move, a sharp knock sounded at the cabin door. They froze. Cal's expression hardened instantly, the Alpha King emerging as he rose to his feet. Stay behind me, he commanded quietly. Not happening, Sarah countered, standing despite her lingering weakness. The knock came again, followed by a familiar voice. Your Majesty, it's Marcus. I'm alone and unarmed. Cal's tension didn't ease. Marcus is my beta. My second in command. He looked at Sarah. If he's here, it means the capital knows everything. Then I guess it's time to face the consequences together. They moved toward the door and whatever waited beyond it. Chapter 7, Choices and Consequence. Marcus was younger than Sarah expected, perhaps 30, with sandy hair and sharp green eyes that assessed her the moment Cale opened the door. He wore the formal attire of the royal guard, but his stance was relaxed, non-threatening. Still, Sarah felt magic gathering at her fingertips, ready to defend if needed. Your Majesty, Marcus bowed formally to Cale, then, to Sarah's surprise, bowed equally low to her. And to the Lady Sarah, I come bearing messages from the capital, none of them particularly good. Cale stepped aside, allowing Marcus to enter. How bad? The council has called for an emergency session. They're demanding you return immediately to face charges of treason. Marcus's expression was grim. They claim you've been compromised by Omega magic, that you're no longer fit to rule. Councillor Thorne has already begun gathering support for a vote of no confidence. Sarah's blood ran cold. This is my fault. They'll use me to destroy you. They'll try, Cale corrected, his voice steady. But Marcus didn't ride through the night just to deliver bad news. Did you, old friend? Marcus smiled slightly. No, Your Majesty. I also came to tell you that not everyone on the council stands against you. Several members are. Intrigued by recent events, they remember the old stories about what the kingdom was before the Omega purges, before fear replaced wisdom. He pulled a sealed letter from his coat. Lady Elara sends this. She says the archives contain information about breaking curses, including the one on your bloodline. Cale took the letter, his expression unreadable. Elara always did love her ancient texts more than politics. She also loves you, Your Majesty, as do many in the kingdom who've seen how you've tried to rule differently than your ancestors. Marcus glanced at Sarah. The people are afraid, yes, but they're also curious. Word of what happened in the forest is spreading, how an Omega appeared after 500 years, how she fought beside their king rather than against him. Some are calling it a sign, and the others are calling it heresy, Cale said flatly. Well, yes, but that's why Lady Elara suggests you don't return to the capital. Not yet. Marcus pulled out another document, a map, marked with several locations. She's identified 3 places where the old magic still runs strong, places where the bond between you and Lady Sarah might be strengthened. If you can prove the curse can be broken, if you can show the council that an Omega and an Alpha can be mated without destroying the kingdom, then we might have a chance at changing their minds, Sarah finished quietly. She studied the map, seeing locations marked deep in the wilderness, far from civilization. But that means running. Hiding while they consolidate power against us. Or it means giving ourselves time to become strong enough that they can't destroy us, Cale countered. He met her eyes. Together, we made a dozen trained hunters flee in terror. Imagine what we could do with time to learn to work in harmony. To truly understand this bond, Marcus cleared his throat. There's one more thing, Your Majesty. Your brother has arrived at the capital. Cale went absolutely still. Damien is supposed to be in the Northern Territories for another month. He cut his tour short when news of the Omega's awakening reached him. He's asking questions about the succession, about what happens if you're deemed unfit to rule. The temperature in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. Sarah felt Cal's fury through their bond, not the hot, explosive kind, but something colder, more dangerous. My brother has always been ambitious, Cal said quietly. But I didn't think he'd move against me so quickly. I don't think he's moving against you, Your Majesty. I think he's being courted by the council as an alternative. Marcus's expression was troubled. He's unmarked by the curse. He could potentially find a mate, produce heirs. In their eyes, he's the safer choice. Sarah watched emotions flicker across Cal's face: betrayal, anger, and underneath it all, a deep hurt that made her chest ache. Without thinking, she reached for his hand, lacing her fingers through his. He gripped her like a lifeline. Then the council will have to be disappointed, Cal said finally. Because I'm not giving up my throne, and I'm certainly not giving up my mate. He looked at Marcus. Tell Ilara we'll follow her plan. We'll visit the sacred sites, strengthen our bond, and gather proof that this can work. But make it clear I'm not hiding. I'm preparing. And when we return to the capital, it will be to claim what's rightfully ours. Marcus bowed again. As you command, Your Majesty. He turned to Sarah. For what it's worth, my lady, I believe you're exactly what this kingdom needs. Change is terrifying, but it's also necessary. And if anyone can guide us through it, it's the two of you together. After Marcus left, silence filled the cabin. Sarah watched Cal stare at the map, his jaw tight, his shoulders carrying the weight of a kingdom's worth of decisions. Your brother, she said softly. You're close to him. We were once. Cal's voice was hollow. When we were children, before the crown became a wedge between us. Damien was the one who comforted me when I learned about the curse, who promised we'd face it together. He laughed bitterly. I suppose some promises are easier to keep than others. Sarah moved in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. This is too much. You're risking everything: your throne, your family, your entire life for someone you just met. For a bond that might not even work. Are you trying to convince me to walk away? Cal asked, one eyebrow raised. I'm trying to give you an out. You could return to the capital, denounce me as a threat, say I used magic to manipulate you. Your brother would have no claim, the council would be satisfied, and you'd keep your crown, and you'd be hunted for the rest of your very short life. I survived 500 years in a tomb. I can survive on my own. Cal caught her face in his hands, his touch firm but gentle. Listen to me very carefully, Sarah. I'm not choosing you over my kingdom. I'm choosing you and my kingdom. Because I believe I know that the only way forward is together. His thumb stroked her cheeks. The old ways were broken. They led to genocide and curses and 5 centuries of suffering. If I have to burn down every tradition, fight every council member, even face my own brother to build something better, then that's what I'll do. Why? The word came out barely a whisper. Why risk so much? Because the moment I touched you, I felt the curse start to crack. Because when we fought together, I felt more alive than I have in my entire reign. Because you make me want to be the king my people deserve, not just the one they're stuck with. He leaned his forehead against hers, and she felt him trembling. And because I'm falling in love with you, Sarah, terrifyingly, impossibly, undeniably in love with you. Her breath caught. It was too soon, too fast, too much. They'd known each other barely a day. This should have been impossible, but her heart knew what her mind refused to accept she was falling to. Cal, she started. But he silenced her with a gentle finger against her lips. You don't have to say it back. I'm not asking you to. I just need you to know that whatever happens, whatever we face out there, you're not alone. We're in this together, for as long as you want me by your side. Sarah thought about her mother, who'd been mated to a monster and died protecting her daughter from him. She thought about 500 years of sleeping, of missing entire lifetimes while the world moved on. She thought about the revenge she'd craved upon waking, the fury that had sustained her through that first terrible night, And she thought about the man in front of her flawed, burdened, but trying so desperately to be better than his bloodline. Maybe love wasn't about being ready. Maybe it was about being brave enough to try. She removed his finger from her lips and replaced it with her mouth. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of them afraid of shattering something precious. But then Kel made a sound low in his throat, and his hand slid into her hair, and the kiss deepened into something that stole her breath and made the mate bond sing. This was what she'd been missing. This connection, this completion, this sense of finally being whole after centuries of fractured existence. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sarah rested her forehead against his chest and felt his heart pounding in time with hers. "I'm not ready to say the words yet," she admitted, "but I'm ready to try, to see where this goes, to fight for whatever this is between us." Kel's arms wrapped around her, strong and sure. "That's all I need, little Omega. That's more than enough." Outside, the sun climbed higher, marking the beginning of their journey. 3 sacred sites, 3 chances to strengthen their bond and prove that love could break even the oldest curses. It wouldn't be easy. The council would hunt them. His brother would challenge them. The entire kingdom would judge them. But for the first time since waking, Sarah felt something other than rage. She felt hope. Chapter 8. The first trial of Whispering Falls lay 3 days' journey to the east, hidden deep in territory so wild that even wolves avoided it. According to Lady Illyra's notes, it was one of the oldest sacred sites, a place where the first Omegas had performed bonding ceremonies before the purges. Before fear had poisoned the relationship between their kinds, Sarah and Kel traveled mostly in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. He'd shifted into his Voth form for much of the journey, moving with fluid grace through the undergrowth while she rode on his back, her fingers buried in his thick fur. The intimacy of it surprised her, feeling his muscles bunch and release beneath her, sensing his awareness of her through the bond. The way he'd pause whenever she needed rest without her having to ask. This was trust, she realized. Raw and unvarnished. On the 3rd evening, they heard it sound like wine through crystals, haunting and beautiful. Kel shifted back to human form, pulling on the clothes he'd carried in a pack. And together they approached the falls. The sight stole Sarah's breath. Water cascaded down a cliff face that seemed to touch the sky. But it wasn't the height that made it sacred. The water itself glowed with a soft silver luminescence, and the mist rising from the pool below formed shapes, figures dancing, embracing, living entire lifetimes in the span of heartbeats, the memories of every bonding ceremony performed here. Kel said quietly, reading from Illyra's notes, "The magic remembers. It shows what was, what could be." Sarah watched a phantom couple emerge from the mist, an Omega woman and an alpha male, their hands clasped, their foreheads pressed together. The love radiating from them was palpable even across centuries. Then they faded, replaced by another couple and another, an endless parade of bonds that had stood against time. "What do we have to do?" she asked. Kel consulted the notes again, and she saw his hand tremble slightly. "We have to enter the pool together. Let the water judge whether our bond is true or false. If it's false, if we're forcing something that isn't meant to be, the magic will reject us violently, according to this. And if it's true, then the curse will crack a little more. The bond will strengthen, and we'll be one step closer to proving to the council that this can work." He looked at her, vulnerability written across his features. "But Sarah, if you have any doubts, any at all, we shouldn't do this. The magic here is ancient and unforgiving. It won't accept half-truths or maybes." Sarah studied the glowing water, watching the phantom couples dance through their eternal moments. She thought about the kiss they'd shared, about how right it had felt despite every logical reason it shouldn't, about how Kel had held her through the night after she'd collapsed, how he'd offered her everything and asked for nothing in return. "I'm terrified," she admitted, "but not of the magic. I'm terrified of how much I already feel for you, of how much it will hurt if this doesn't work." Kel moved behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Then let's be terrified together." One more time, she turned in his embrace, meeting those impossible amber eyes. No more secrets between us. Not if we're going to do this. No more secrets, he agreed. Ask me anything. Sarah took a breath. Your brother. You said you were close once. What changed? Pain flickered across Kel's face. The night I turned 18, the night I was supposed to find my mate at the ceremonial gathering. Every Wolf in the kingdom attended, and I felt nothing. Not even a whisper of recognition. His arms tightened around her. Damien was there. He saw my failure, saw how it destroyed me. And instead of comforting me, he asked if that meant he would be heir instead. He's ambitious. He's desperate. Our father never gave him the attention he craved, always focused on preparing me for the throne. Damien spent his whole life in my shadow, and the curse became his opportunity. Cal's voice went rough. I don't hate him for it. I understand it. But I can't trust him either. Not anymore. Sarah pressed closer, offering what comfort she could. My turn for honesty. Please, part of me still wants revenge. Still wants to make every descendant of Aldrich Thornwood pay for what he did. She felt Cal stiffen, but continued. But a bigger part of me is tired of being angry. Tired of letting a monster dead for 5 centuries control my life. I want to choose something for myself, choose who I become rather than letting history decide for me. And what do you choose? She pulled back enough to see his face. I choose to try, with you? Despite everything saying I shouldn't, I choose this bond. The relief in his expression was devastating. Then let's prove it. To the magic, to the council, to everyone who thinks we're doomed to fail. They undressed slowly, carefully, neither quite meeting the other's eyes despite having shared so much already. The vulnerability of this moment felt different, more exposed, more real. When they were bare, Cale took her hand and led her toward the glowing pool. The water was warm when they stepped in, almost uncomfortably so. It climbed higher with each step, ankles, knees, thighs, until they stood waist-deep in liquid starlight. The mist swirled around them, carrying whispers in languages Sarah had never heard but somehow understood. Show us your truth, the water demanded. Show us your bond, unvarnished and raw. Cale pulled her close, and the moment their bare skin connected, the magic erupted. Images flooded Sarah's mind, not memories, but emotions. She felt Cal's loneliness, the weight of a crown placed on shoulders too young to bear it. She felt his desperation the night he couldn't find his mate, the hollow ache that had lived in his chest for years. She felt his first glimpse of her in the forest, the shock of recognition that had torn through him like lightning. And he felt her in return. The terror of waking 500 years displaced. The fury at everything stolen from her. The grief for a mother she barely remembered but mourned with every breath. And underneath it all, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have something good despite everything that had gone wrong. The water around them began to glow brighter, the temperature rising from warm to hot. The phantom couples in the mist drew closer, their ancient power pressing against Sarah and Cale, testing the strength of what they'd built in mere days. Is this love? The magic asked. Or is this convenience? Desperation. A broken curse seeking any port in the storm. It's all of those things, Cale gasped, his arms locked around Sarah as the water tried to pull them apart. And it's more. It's choice. It's bravery. It's two people deciding to try despite every reason not to. Is this love? The magic demanded of Sarah. She thought about the question. Was it love? Could it be so soon, so fast, with so much trauma and history between them? But then she felt Cal's heart beating against hers. Felt the way he held her like she was precious and powerful all at once. Felt the bone-deep certainty that she would fight gods themselves to keep him safe. Yes, she breathed. It's the beginning of love. It's imperfect and messy and probably doomed. But it's real. It's mine. It's ours. The water exploded upward in a column of silver light that pierced the sky. Power crashed through both of them, the mate bond no longer fragile but blazing, undeniable. Sarah felt something fundamental shift inside her, a piece clicking into place that she hadn't known was missing. And Cale felt it too. Through the bond, she felt his shock, his joy, his overwhelming relief as the curse that had haunted his bloodline for 500 years cracked like shattered glass when the light faded and the water calmed. They stood in the pool, still holding each other, both breathing hard. Did it work? Sarah whispered. Cal's laugh was shaky with emotion. Look, she followed his gaze down and gasped. On their left wrists, matching marks had appeared, intricate patterns that looked like Wolf prints intertwined with omega spirals, glowing faintly with residual magic. The mate mark. The physical proof of their bond. It's real, Cal said, wonder in his voice. You're really mine. And I'm really yours. Sarah traced the mark on his wrist, marveling at how it mirrored her own. Two more sights, two more trials to make it unbreakable. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her from the pool to the soft grass nearby. But tonight, we celebrate surviving the first one. As he laid her down gently, his body covering hers, Sarah realized she was no longer afraid. Whatever came next, council opposition, his brother's ambition, the trials ahead, they would face it together. Marked, mated, unbreakable. Chapter 9. Shadows of the past. They never made it to the second sacred site. Sarah woke to the sound of horses and voices, many voices converging on their camp. Dawn had barely broken, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, and Cale was already on his feet, his body tense as he scented the wind. How many? She asked quietly, reaching for the simple dress she'd acquired from a village they'd passed through. At least 20. Maybe more. His eyes glowed amber in the dim light. They're not trying to hide their approach. This is an official delegation. Her stomach dropped. Your brother, probably. Cale pulled on his shirt, his jaw tight. He's the only one who'd have the authority to lead a group this large into the wilderness. He glanced at the mate mark on her wrist, now visible to anyone who looked. They'll have seen it by now. The magic sent out a pulse when the bond formed. Every Wolf within 100 miles would have felt it. Sarah joined him at the edge of their camp, watching as riders emerged from the trees. In the lead was a man who could only be Damien Thornwood. He had Cal's height and build, but his features were sharper. His dark hair shot through with silver despite his relative youth. His eyes, when they found Cal, were cold. Brother, Damien said, reining in his horse. You've been difficult to track. I wasn't aware I needed to be tracked. Cal's voice was level, betraying none of the hurt Sarah felt through their bond. I'm still Alpha King. I don't answer to anyone's schedule but my own. That's debatable. Damien dismounted, flanked by a dozen armed guards. The council has voted. You've been deemed compromised by Omega magic and unfit to rule until you can prove otherwise. His gaze slid to Sarah, cold and assessing. And you must be the source of all this chaos. The lost pup who's managed to bewitch a king. Sarah felt her magic rise in response to the threat, but Cal's hand on her arm steadied her. Through the bond, she felt his silent message. Let me handle this. Sarah is my mate, Cal said clearly, holding up his wrist to display the mark. Recognized by the sacred magic itself. The curse on our bloodline has begun to break because of her. Murmurs rippled through the guards. Several of them stared at the mate mark with expressions ranging from awe to fear. Damien's face, however, remained impassive, or she's used ancient Omega magic to create a false bond. Knowing it would be your greatest weakness, Damien stepped closer, his hand resting on the sword at his hip. The council demands you return to the capital immediately for evaluation. The Omega will be held in protective custody until her magic can be assessed by neutral parties. Protective custody, Sarah repeated, her voice sharp. Is that what you call a cell? I call it pragmatism. Damien's attention fixed on her fully now, and she saw something flicker in his expression, not quite hostility, but close. 500 years ago, your people nearly destroyed this kingdom. Forgive us if we're cautious about history repeating itself. My people were slaughtered because your ancestor feared what he couldn't control. Sarah shot back. The only ones who nearly destroyed this kingdom were the Thornwoods themselves. The guards shifted nervously, hands moving toward weapons. Cal stepped between Sarah and his brother, his voice dropping into an alpha command that made everyone straighten involuntarily. Enough. Both of you, he looked at Damien. You want me to return to the capital. Fine, but Sarah comes as my mate, not as a prisoner. She stays by my side through any evaluation. And she's treated with the respect due to the Alpha King's bonded partner. The council won't agree to that. Then, the council can come here and tell me. Themselves, Cal's eyes flashed Volf gold. I'm done playing political games while they decide my fate. I've passed the first trial. The sacred magic itself has recognized our bond. If they want me to prove anything else, they'll do it on my terms, not theirs. For a long moment, the brothers stared at each other, years of history and hurt and rivalry crackling between them. Then Damien's expression shifted into something Sarah couldn't quite read. You've changed, he said quietly. The brother I knew would never have challenged the council so directly. The brother you knew was trying to please everyone while slowly dying inside. Cal's voice softened slightly. She saved me, Damien, in more ways than just breaking the curse. And if you can't accept that, I didn't say I couldn't accept it. Damien glanced at Sarah again, and this time she saw the conflict in his eyes. I said the council won't. There's a difference. He took a breath. They sent me to bring you back because they thought I'd force the issue. Use our shared blood to manipulate you into compliance. And will you? No, Damien's jaw clenched. But not because I approve of this insanity. Because I've spent my entire life watching you sacrifice everything for duty, for honor, for a throne you never wanted. And if this is the one thing you're choosing for yourself, he shook his head. Then I won't be the one to take it from you. The admission hung in the air, heavy with unspoken emotion. Sarah felt Cal's shock through the bond, felt the fragile hope kindling in his chest. You mean that? Cal asked. I mean, I'm still angry that you always got everything I wanted. I'm still envious that you found your mate while I'm still searching for mine. And I still think you're making a mistake that could cost you everything. Damien's expression hardened again. But you're my brother. And blood matters, even when we wish it didn't. One of the guards cleared his throat nervously. Your Grace, the council expects a report by nightfall. Damien nodded, not taking his eyes off Cal. Tell them the Alpha King is returning to the capital of his own accord, accompanied by his mate. Tell them he invites any counselor who doubts the validity of his bond to meet him at the Hall of Judgment in 3 days' time. He paused. And tell them that if anyone attempts to separate or harm the Omega before then, they'll answer to both Thornwood brothers. The guard's eyes widened. Your Grace, the council won't. The council can accept it or find themselves to Alpha King's short instead of one. Damien mounted his horse again, his guard scrambling to follow. Before he rode away, he looked back at Sarah. I don't trust you. I don't like you. And I think you're going to bring chaos to a kingdom that's barely holding together as it is. Probably, Sarah agreed. Good. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. The old order was broken anyway. Maybe it needs someone willing to burn it down so we can build something better. He looked at Cal. 3 days, brother. Use them wisely. Then he was gone, taking most of the guards with him but leaving behind, for your protection, he'd claimed. Though everyone knew they were watchers as much as guards, Sarah turned to Cal, seeing the storm of emotions playing across his face. Your brother is complicated. That's one word for him. Cal pulled her close, pressing his face into her hair. 3 days until we face the council. Until they try to tear apart what we've built. Then we make the most of them. Sarah tilted her head back to meet his eyes. We visit the other sacred sites. We strengthen the bond until it's impossible for them to deny. And we show them that an Omega and an Alpha together are stronger than either is apart. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's terrifying and impossible and probably suicidal. She smiled despite the fear curling in her stomach. But we're good at impossible things, remember. Cal laughed, the sound rough, but genuine. When did you become the optimistic one? When I realized I had something worth fighting for. She traced the mate mark on his wrist, feeling the bond pulse between them. Someone worth fighting for. He kissed her then, deep and desperate, as if trying to memorize the taste of her against his lips. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers, 3 days, he whispered. Then we go to war together, Sarah promised, always together, behind them. The 4 guards pretended not to watch as the Alpha King and his impossible mate prepared for the battle that would determine not just their fate, but the future of the entire kingdom. The sun climbed higher, marking the beginning of the end, or perhaps, Sarah thought as Cal's hand found hers, the beginning of something entirely new.